everyone. David Geisler here with NGIM. Welcome to the program tonight. Now, before I introduce our guest tonight, let me share a little bit about how God has brought our ministry, Norm Geisler International Ministries, to where we are today. So let me just kind of summarize kind of where we started and where we are now. Almost 17 years ago, God called my wife and I to Asia. Some of you may know this, to develop a personally and culturally sensitive models of evangelism. But when I began to teach in the seminaries there in Singapore, the Lord made it clear to me that these culturally sensitive models are not only needed for Chinese people, but also for people, all people impacted by postmodern thinking. So the Lord opened doors for me to travel all over Asia, those 7 years that I was in Singapore from 2004 to 2011. And at that time, I was teaching a blend of evangelism and what I would call light apologetics. Now, during that time period, I also got my Doctor of Ministries degree at Southern Evangelical Seminary, which is where I teach now as an adjunct professor. And I got my Doctor of Ministry project. My project focused on teaching new evangelism paradigms. And a few years later, my father and I co-wrote a book together and was published in 2009 called Conversational Evangelism. And this training, as some of you know, is one of the things that we teach at the Institute here. So now fast forward to more recently, 5 years ago, my father and I changed our name, started Norm Geisler International Ministries. And since then, I realized God wants NGIM to teach more than what I would call a combination of evangelism and light apologetics. It seems like that the Lord has made it very clear now that NGIM is supposed to teach at a much deeper level, and also in a way that integrates three important disciplines that we talk a lot about at NGIM: evangelism, apologetics, and discipleship. So basically now at NGIM, we want to carry the DNA of what we would call three-dimensional apologetic model. It's one that involves evangelism with a sensitivity to the person and to the culture, and an apologetic with a certain posture. The posture is to win the person, not the argument, and a discipleship with a focus on the mandate first. We talk about the fact that the mandate is more important than the mission. The mandate to be a certain kind of Christian is much more important in God's economy, and that thrives because of the focus on living in light of eternity and actively practicing Christ's first living. And so that's kind of what we want to do at NGIM from now on. We want to focus on those three aspects. And we have on our website, some of you may know this, we have bookmarks for both evangelism, apologetics, and discipleship, teaching people these paradigms. The 12 points bookmark are for apologetics, the Listen 5 Planks bookmark are for the evangelism part, and the 4 R's bookmark is basically teaching people a model of discipleship and integrating that into evangelism and apologetics based on the 4 R's, which is rooted, rested, ready, and reaching. So this is what God has revealed to us so far, and we are in the process of more strategically partnering with different people around the globe to help equip the church in ways that wed the trifecta that my father developed, which is apologetics, philosophy, and theology, with this new trifecta of apologetics, evangelism, and discipleship. And that's what our ministry is going to be focusing on in the years ahead. and God is calling our ministry to play an important part to wed these two trifectas to create a movement. We hope and pray that will change our culture for Christ. Now, with that in mind, I want to talk about our guests and give a little introduction. Our guests tonight are some of the NGIM leaders who are attempting to teach this new paradigm in different parts of the globe. And we're so thankful that they have joined us tonight in different time zones for Raymond and for Umesh in Nepal. First, let me talk about Roberto. In case you haven't heard, God has raised up Roberto Lozano to be our new director of Latin America and Spain. And we're so thankful, Roberto, that you're with us now, and welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, David.
So we'll look forward to a conversation with you. Now, let me just give you a little bit of background. What stands out to me most about Roberto is that he has a real heart for God. It's really undeniable. And let me tell our audience a little bit how we met. A few years ago, during the National SES Apologetics Conference, Roberto actually saw me carrying some boxes from our table. And he told me later that that was the moment he knew he wanted to be a part of our ministry, because he saw from the top down that our priority was really to be servants first. And the good news is that not only is Roberto a servant leader, I've gotten to know him, he's also a great teacher and a great leader. And I'm confident he will have a huge impact on the direction our ministry takes in Latin America and Spain in the days ahead. Now, let me talk for a moment about our staff person in Singapore, Raymond Kwan. Raymond is a former student of mine at Singapore Bible College. Raymond, when did you and I meet? When did I teach your class at Singapore Bible College? Do you remember what year that was?
It was 2006.
Was it 2006? Okay, we got there in 2004. So in 2000, I started teaching in 4 seminaries in Singapore. And one of them was called Singapore Bible College, which was a very important Bible, it is still a very important Bible college in Singapore. And he was one of those that I discipled, and when we were ministering in Asia and living in Singapore. And Raymond, gets opportunities to disciple Christian leaders and conduct training series in Singapore at different churches, teaching people the integration of apologetics and evangelism. And Raymond, it's really great to have you with us tonight.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Another guest joining us tonight is Umesh. Umesh, it's great to have you with us. Let me tell everyone a little bit about yourself. You're in Nepal right now, right? You live in Nepal?
Yes, sir. I live in Nepal.
And what city in Nepal?
I live in Kathmandu, sir.
Okay. So Umesh received his BA in theology from Nepal Ebenezer Bible College. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Right? Yes. And this Bible college is actually now partnering with Norm Geisler Institute to develop a master's program. Actually, it's the first one in the country of Nepal, a master's program in apologetics. And we're excited about that. And so Umesh travels from village to village teaching conversational evangelism approach, and he continues his studies at Fast Track Seminary, which is kind of our online seminary out like seminary in a box, basically. You get a whole seminary degree without actually getting a seminary degree. So welcome, everyone. I'm glad you're all here tonight. We're glad to have you here and help us discuss tonight, how The tools of my father are helpful in different parts of the culture. So we want to talk about that. We also want to talk about why there seems to be a desperate need for us to bring these resources that my father developed to more and more Christians around the globe. And that's why we want to focus globally tonight and talk about your different areas, but then also talking about how maybe we can bring these tools and our resources to other parts of the globe as well to help other Christians. Some of you may or may not know, I get contacts from people all over the globe, pastors and Christian leaders who have heard about Norm Geisler and have read some of his materials, and they want further training, and we try to provide training opportunities for people in different parts of the globe. Now, Roberto, let me start with you in our discussion tonight. So first of all, please tell our audience, why do you believe that God has led you to our NGIM ministry to equip the body of Christ in Latin America and Spain? Just take a few minutes and just tell us a little bit about your journey in coming to us so that our audience has a better understanding how this all came about.
Yes, thank you, David. I would like first to thank God because it's a blessing serving through NGIM. It's a privilege to be part of the legacy of your dad, Norm Geisler, and to work with you and the wonderful team at NGIM. So I'm very thankful for that. Why God led me to NGIM? You know that this is a question that I have asked myself several times. To understand my answer, I have had gone back even before I became a Christian believer, because it's my personal story behind this. Because I grew up as a non-believer. I never denied the existence of God. But to me, God was kind of invisible friend for weak people that needed something beyond themselves to deal with their life, with their problems. Christianity was everything but appealing to me. It was very irrational and emotional. But one day, I just got saved by grace for no reason. Just God reached me. And after I became a Christian, I discovered something called Christian apologetics. And I realized that's something that I wanted to get into and study the discipline to understand the reason of my faith. I understood that something like this was what I needed at that time when I didn't believe. I needed reasons to believe, reasons that nobody shared with me at that time. Then it was here in Canada that I asked my pastor about this discipline, and he told me, you know what, go ahead, go for it. I applied to this master's degree at Liberty University, and I was admitted. Then once I started my studies very early, doing Christian apologetics, I realized that the discipline is, I would say, kind of intellectual discipline. I was feeling at that time that this needed to be brought down to a level for the average Christian believer to be used in evangelism and discipleship. So it was a few years ago when I met you over there in the conference in Charlotte, and I learned all about NGIM. So today, David, we can learn theology from different textbooks. We can learn about different doctrines. But from the books of your father, we can learn not only theology, but we learn the objections about the doctrines and how to defend them. All this within the package of systematic theology that your father developed. And thanks to God that we have those books. We haven't in English. And I think in other languages, I think in Portuguese too. Pastor friend of mine have told me about their concern. Our congregation in Spanish are not prepared to fight the postmodernism today. It's a great need to understand good philosophy. There is a great need to understand and to learn the basis of apologetics. Now here at NGIM, we offer this model that you just mentioned. It's a blend of apologetic, evangelism, and discipleship. When your dad was working on his model, on his approach of philosophy, apologetic, and theology, I believe he was a pioneer 4 years ago. Now today, I can say that I see that you're doing something different too, blending apologetics, evangelism, and discipleship. And I don't see neither anybody doing something like this as far as I know. So I can say that I believe you're also a pioneer today. So we know now how relevant the work of your dad is today. So we're about to see how this model that we are developing here in NGIM will impact the church and our culture in the future. So this is the burden that I have in my heart, and this is why I believe God led me to NGIM.
Amen. Amen. Thank you for sharing that. Let me ask you another question, Roberto. I want to hear your thoughts on why is there a need to adjust these models for different cultures around the globe? Or let me say it another way. How does your cultural religion or the general worldview of your country, you were born in Venezuela, right?
Yes.
But I'm sure this could apply to many of the different Latin American countries,
Yes.
although there are some differences, I know. So how does your cultural religion or the general worldview in Latin America, how does that color the way you approach sharing about Jesus?
Yeah, this is a good question. Actually, when I talk about apologetics, that's a kind of question that people ask. People, fellow believer, Christian believer, they don't understand quite well how this works. And I would say this: we all need Jesus. At the end of the day, that's what we need.
Amen.
But we speak different languages.
Right.
And we say the truth about Jesus in different languages, but it's the same truth. So the same way we live in different cultures that need different approaches to speak about the same Jesus. That's how I see it. And here in my ministry, I can see very clear when we put in one side Spain, that is a Catholic society. Catholicism is in the culture of Spanish people. Let's see back to the history. Spanish people are very religious, but not safe. As in the rest of Europe, Christianity is dying over there in Spain. Spain needs revival.
Mm-hmm.
Spain needs the truth of Jesus. So on the other hand, we have Latin America, a region that is actually seeing how Christianity is growing. Okay, but we have problem in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
That paganism is a big problem over there. People believe, but they need the truth. So we have different needs or different realities in different places. One need, that is Jesus, but we need to be sensitive to the culture, how to approach a Spanish person, how to approach somebody from Latin America.
Good. Very good. So Raymond, let me turn to you. How do people in Singapore approach the idea of Jesus? And what are some initial expectations or perceptions of who Jesus is that can affect the way Singaporeans interpret what we mean when we talk about salvation?
So I would say that people in Singapore is very much like Athens in the New Testament in Acts 17. That Singaporeans, part of it is very pluralist, like the Athens, like the people in Athens that they don't actually worship a single god. They worship different god. Is basically syncretism between Buddhism, Taoism, Chinese, and another some form of religion. And also part of that is a phrase in Singaporean called Kasuism. What it means is that fearing to lose out. And in terms of religious belief, yeah, that is. And some of them wouldn't mind having, Jesus as part of their belief system.
Right.
So the challenge now is that we have to tell them that they have to accept Jesus exclusively. So when you tell like Singaporean Chinese or Singaporean or Chinese that Jesus is the only way, then they would somewhat perceive it as arrogant and exclusive claim, and the same way goes for salvation. That when we tell them that Jesus is the only way, they just couldn't understand because of their pluralism lenses. So, I mean, one way to use conversational evangelism is to use analogy to tell them, and that Singaporean major population is Chinese, so they one of the key characteristic would be is to honor the parents, right? So we can use some an analogy like that, that I would explain that if God the Father created the universe, then we are his sons and daughters.
Mm.
So now the thing is that how many fathers do we have biologically? I mean, we have only one, right? So if we are created, so the key is not getting as many fathers as we can, but find out who is our genuine father.
Mm.
Just like the ancient emperor in China, that they worship one god, they don't worship idol. So that's how we actually use analogies and some kind of Chinese culture to try to build bridges for Singaporeans to understand more about Jesus and salvation.
That's very good. Thank you for sharing that. Umesh, let me ask you, you're currently training with us, and so tell us a little bit about your story. What was your perspective on Jesus growing up? Can you hear us? Umesh, can you hear us? There we go. I think we lost him for a second. Are you guys still up? Can you all hear me? Okay. Sorry about that. Now, so let me just go on to another question. Let me just kind of frame it this way. Although there are specific cultural differences that we need to adapt our model of evangelism, apologetics, and discipleship in order to be effective, I think we should keep in mind that because of our global connectivity, there are some similarities among our cultures around the globe. And we at NGIM talk about how in the US in particular, that was founded 200 years ago with a Judeo-Christian worldview, and how this is reflected in our constitution and our legal system. In fact, it was that way up to about 50 or 60 years ago. Most Americans still held that worldview. But since then, the last 50 or 60 years, we all know that's changed. And we now hold to a postmodern worldview in which truth itself is not absolute, which, as you know, makes our task in evangelism much more difficult. Because we've rejected this idea, we've talked about this in the past, that we've rejected this idea of a meta-narrative, a story that explains all the stories. And these beliefs have permeated our globe. And now, because of the interconnectivity of the world through social media and cable TV, it's really only closed countries and animistic cultures that have not been influenced by postmodern relativistic thinking. And this is something that I've observed as I've traveled for the last 20 years in different parts of the globe. Now, you guys know that my father spent a lifetime developing resources for those who have doubts. And the good news is that that means he's left us a gold mine of resources and questions for us. The question for us at NGIM is to address, how do we get more of these resources in the hands of more cultures? And also, we have to wrestle with, how do we effectively use these resources to answer the kinds of questions people are asking today in different cultures around the globe. And these are two things I want us to keep in mind as we talk tonight. And I'm convinced, out of the 100+ books that my father wrote, many of them can still provide the kind of insight that Christians need to not only survive, but thrive in what I would call this post-corona world. That's a new term I've coined, post-corona world. We don't live just in a post-Christian, post-modern world. Now we live in a post-corona world, and all that's involved with that. Now, Roberto, let me ask you this. With that in mind, out of all my father's resources, what do you feel is most needed in Latin America and Spain, and why do you think that's so?
All of them. But no, David, I believe that that your father did an incredible job mixing apologetic theology and philosophy.
Yeah.
When we read those textbooks, so we see how Dr. Geisler teaches theology, but he also teaches the objections against the doctrines and how to defend those doctrines, how to answer to those objections. You know what? This is something that I'm pretty sure generations of Spanish-speaking believers haven't seen ever. This kind of approach, these resources. So the Bible says in Colossians 2:8 that we should be aware of those philosophy after the tradition of men, after the rudiment of the world, and not after Christ. So I believe that Dr. Geisler left resources that help us to battle those bad philosophies. So I believe that one of the most important work of your dad is that series of systematic theology.
Okay.
We have those 4 volumes, and we have also 1 volume that, from my perspective, one of the most needed books to be translated into Spanish. I believe these books can be of great impact for the church if we have them available in Spanish.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And as you know, I'm trying to work to talk to the publisher to find out if we can get that book translated into Spanish, and especially electronically, because that would be a very good resource for you in all your work in Latin America and Spain in the next few years. So maybe we can ask our listeners to pray for that somehow that God would provide the resources and for you to travel in Latin America, and the resources to develop these tools so that you can help other pastors and Christian ministry leaders in all those countries in Latin America to more effectively make it better equip the Christians in their care. And so we will certainly keep that in prayer. Raymond, which one of my father's resources have you seen has had the greatest impact in Singapore and maybe with other Chinese in the area?
I know that Singaporean Chinese are very practical. So in the lay circle, they find conversational evangelism most helpful, because it basically helped them to ask questions and also start spiritual dialogue with their friends in this postmodern society. And I mean, I heard after training, I heard that, you know, people find that certain phrases in the book, for example, like do versus done, or the phrase like contrasting Buddha, Muhammad, and Jesus is most helpful because they can use it to share the gospel in the most non-defensive way.
Yeah, very interesting.
In
You know, when I
addition-
travel in Indonesia and Malaysia and teach at different seminaries there, what I find that people remember my father for is not his Christian apologetics, but for his ethics. It's his ethics book that people know Norm Geisler for in those countries. I just find that very interesting. You know, Raymond, it might be helpful to mention that when we translated our book, Conversational Evangelism, into simplified Chinese text, which is what mainland Chinese speak, that you played a very important role in helping to edit that translation. And more than that, also you added an appendix where you explain some of the Chinese models for building bridges with people from a Chinese perspective. Why don't you just take a few minutes and talk about that model that you developed and based on understanding what the Chinese emperors used to understand about God.
Yeah, so basically the genesis of this was that when I go to training, I mean, I train the 5 planks. Then one common questions that I have is that, I mean, we have to establish the creator, because the first plank is actually we are accountable to the creator. So in some of the Chinese, they don't understand what is a creator, especially they are from, you know, a Buddhist background and a Taoist background. They would think that they worship different gods, and then, you know, different gods are the creators of the world. So so I've done some research and reading. Actually, we find out that there are traces of you know, worshiping one god in the rich history of China, which is 5,000 years. So in the appendix, I have added these 4 lines of evidence for Chinese to see that Christianity is not a foreign religion, but actually worshiping one god is very rich in Chinese history. So these 4 points are: number 1, the ancient Chinese emperor is actually worshiping one monotheistic god. They call it Shangdi. So basically, the term was used in the Chinese translation of the Bible. And I mean, in the post-coronavirus world, I mean, if you happen to go to Beijing and there's a tourist place called the Temple of Heaven. So this is where the Chinese emperor did their sacrifices to Shangdi over there. So they did their yearly sacrifice to actually pray for the peace and the peace and blessings of the country. So they also view the Chinese emperor as son of heaven. He is the descendant of heaven to rule the land. Secondly, I've also found that you know, in the Chinese philosophers' texts, you know, Confucian's text, and also Taoism, Lao Tzu, actually the writing is not so much on religious, but it's more on the metaphysical reflection of what is the basic principle of the universe. And both of these 2 philosophers mention, you know, that there's a personal supreme being that in the text who is above all name and who is a god that we can relate to and pray to. And Confucian, you know, that Kongfuzi is one of the leading teacher of China. I mean, he has this silver rule, right? Don't do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you. And actually, he talked about the supreme being that listen to prayer. And number 3 is ancestral worship. Many Chinese view that ancestral worship is one of the obstacles of accepting Jesus. Well, as I study further, actually the ancestral worship has its roots in worshiping the God of heaven. So the basic premise is that they give thanks to their parents by so-called giving them sacrifices, but they think that the major purpose of ancestral worship is to worshiping God, because God is something very far away. So they worship, so-called they give sacrifices to their dead ancestors. And last but not least, Chinese characters. There are traces of Chinese characters that has similar roots in some of the biblical theology. I mean, some will view it as coincidence, but some will view that is some of the traces. For example, Chinese words are pictorial words that they draw pictures. For example, the word forbids, right? It composes of two trees and one word, which is revelation. So it kind of clearly tells us the story that when God actually forbids men to eat of the fruits from these two trees through a revelation. So these four useful planks that I think that can complement the 5 planks in conversational evangelism. And it helps Chinese to see, we have deep roots in believing one creator.
I understand that the Chinese word for redemption is translated "lamb over me." That
is sacrifice, basically, a lamb over me.
It's really amazing, all the cultural markers that God has left for people to find him in different cultures all around the world. Raymond, I should explain also to our audience that our ministry was actually given the copyrights to the simplified Chinese translation of conversational evangelism as a gift. And we raised money to have it translated into simplified Chinese text. And we have given that as a gift to Chinese people. And all they have to do is go to our website at ngim.org, click on the resource button, and then scroll down to where it says free. And you can download this book, Conversational Evangelism in Simplified Chinese Text, and you can download it for free electronically. And in the appendix, isn't that where you have all the things that you have added to the book, Raymond? Isn't that version of where you talk about?
Yes, it's an appendix of the book.
Yes.
Yeah, just flip to the.
I would encourage all our listeners to, if they have Chinese friends that speak simplified Chinese, or that read Chinese simplified Chinese texts, or they themselves can do it, to get the book. Umesh, are you back with us?
Yes, sir. Sorry for that.
Okay. So let me just ask you the question I was going to ask you before is, obviously you're teaching conversational evangelism. How has that helped in your evangelistic efforts in your country? Can you give us a little background about how are you using the book that my father and I wrote together to help in sharing the gospel in your country?
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, especially in Nepal, I go to different places teaching conversational evangelism. And right now, I'm using these tools, and God is using these tools amazingly. Whenever I go in a different churches and I meet different people, when they heard about the conversational evangelism, many have said me that it's eye-opening for them, and this has really changed their life. And I met many people, and I talk with them. They share that before that they didn't know, they don't have an ability to share the gospel with different people. But when they learn about the conversational evangelism, they feel and they encourage and they feel confident in their faith. and they started to share the gospel with different people. Now people, personally message me also, and they thank for this material, and they also thank that, who got this idea. This is really, uh, playing a vital role in the culture. And especially, I teach this in the midst of the youth, and they are using it vibrantly. And many times, the pastors, they called me, and they also give the, you know, uh, the update about their faith, and especially their youth's faith, and how their youths are, motivated by these materials. So God is using this material in Nepal so nicely, and many churches, they are, they really want to use this material, these tools, and these ideas in their churches.
Very good. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your country? What is the main religion, and what are some of the obstacles you face in dealing with different people of that religious perspective?
Yeah, actually, Nepal is a multi-religious country, where you see the majority of people are Hindu, and we have almost, 81.3% of the Nepalese, they follow Hindu religion. And but we do have some Buddhist people, and some Muslims, and some Kiratis also. But we have, according to 2011 census, the percentage of Christians in Nepal are only very few. They are just 1.4% only. And especially, living in a polytheistic country, they don't have problem to add one more god in their religion.
Right.
But in the initial period, people find, when they heard about Jesus, they don't have a problem to accept him as one of the god. But when we talk, and we start to talk with them, and we teach that Jesus is not one of the god, but is the god. And but they find it's very, difficult to accept him as their savior. So that's why I'm, but she is helping, and I'm, while I talking with the people, I ask different questions to them, and these questions help them to, understand why Jesus is the God. And the amazing thing is going on also.
It's very good. Very good. Well, we're all praying for you, and we're excited about all the things that God is doing in your life and the people He's allowing you to impact. Just in the short time that you've been with us, with working with NGIM. Now, guys, let me go to another topic. And first, let me give you a little background first. Some of our listeners may know this, that our conversational evangelism approach has opened doors for further ministry in different parts of the globe, because in general, it's getting harder to talk about the gospel in ways that don't offend people. And, fortunately, we encourage others to use our model in a way that's sensitive to some of the problems that people have about religion in general, and especially in closed countries. So let me give you one example of how our CE model was helpful in a closed country recently. You guys are all aware, but maybe our listeners aren't, that Brian Henson is our youth apologetic specialist. Now, last semester, Brian Henson took a self-study class with me at Southern Evangelical Seminary. And as a result of that class, he developed a workbook for how to use conversational evangelism model to speak to Muslims about Jesus. Now, to make a long story short, what happened is he shared some of that material with a Christian who was struggling to witness with some of his Muslim friends. in a closed country, and he used Brian's approach and found that more and more Muslims were actually willing to talk to him about spiritual matters, even about Jesus. And we found out just recently that one of them actually prayed to receive Christ. So we know that a CE approach to witnessing could be helpful in many areas of the globe. So maybe each of you can share a little bit. Umesh has already did this, but how a CE approach can help in sharing the gospel in your personal interactions with people. Maybe you can just share from your own experience. Let's start with Roberto.
Yeah, David, this model of CE being a blessing to me first, not only helped me to be more effective on interacting with other people when sharing the gospel, but also when teaching and speaking in conferences. So I remember a conference a couple of years ago where one of the participants raised his hand asking why we should insist on somebody that rejected Jesus after we shared the gospel with them. That question hit me very hard, deep in my heart. That day I remember something that I learned from you, that our problem is not about methodology, but it's about our heart, our love for the souls. You know, you were talking about this way of reaching Muslims that sometimes is right here in our home. We are failing in having that heart that Jesus has for the lost. And I asked that person, if we don't go back to that person, to that people, if we don't say the truth about Christianity, who's going to do it?
That's right.
Right? So this model changed my heart, how I see evangelism. I see completely in a 180 degrees evangelism from after learning the model that we have here at NGIM. We are here to share the gospel, but we need to do it with compassion, as we are ambassadors of Jesus to bring that person to him. Yes. That's how this model impact my own life.
Yes, very good. Raymond, what about you? Maybe you can share a story of how you use CE in your personal interaction with Singaporeans. How's that help?
So the key advantage is for me to really understand the person's worldview and understand the worldview assumptions and get them discover the conclusion by themselves. So I had the conversation with the one of the students in Nanyang University. So I was actually he was my friend's friend. So he was from materialistic background. So he's from China. Then he thought that materialism, is the key, that philosophy. So he tried to understand the Bible. So he read, the book of Genesis, and he doesn't understand. So by applying CE, I asked him a question that, do you know materialism itself is not material? Then he laughed. Then he asked some further questions. Then he said, how so? Because you know that if you believe that everything is material, it means that everything is made out of atoms. And if it's not material, it doesn't exist, right? So he says, yes. Then I asked further. So now, how is materialism then? Does it make up of atom? Does it make up of matter? So it does not exist, right? If materialism is right. So materialism does not exist. Yeah. So after a long period, that we talk about some other his objection, but I thought that once this objection has been cleared, he asked me further questions, and it took him 1 or 2 years to further, on his spiritual journey. And after 2 years, he actually called me and says that I'm now become a Christian, and thanks, I think, because of your conversation with me back then it was in McDonald's. It says that it opened his mind and allow him to see Christianity in a greater light.
Mm.
Yeah, and he really thanked me, and I actually met him only once or twice, but I was very encouraging. Yeah,
that's great. So, our time is getting towards the end, but let me transition to another kind of question. Guys, what are some of the things that you've learned from my father in the areas of apologetics, philosophy, and theology? And I know we could probably spend an hour on each one of those, but maybe just Roberto, let's start with you. What are some of the things that you've learned that maybe would be good to share with our listeners, that and maybe it would help to motivate them to want to check into the Institute and learn more about the courses that we offer based on all the things that my father has taught at a seminary level and also in different churches?
Yeah, the impact of my studies of the material from your dad, from Norman Geisler, modeled my whole world of apologetics. I did when I did my studies at Liberty, I learned different models and systems for doing Christian apologetics. But when I learned the model developed by Norm Geisler, I gained an incredible clarity on how to do apologetics. It was day and night. It was the opposite. I have the idea, I have the knowledge, I have the concept. But when I came to Norman Geisler, everything came like a wow. Light was there. It was very clear how to do this. So as I mentioned earlier, generation of Spanish-speaking believer haven't seen something like God-honoring philosophy ever. And that's something that we find here. When I have been teaching Christian apologetics in a seminary for a couple of years already.
Right.
And the more I learn from Norman Geisler, the better my classes are. I've been able to provide them with practical knowledge that they can apply right away. I remember one of my students, very interesting, asking me, one of my students of Introduction to Apologetics, asking how to apply apologetics to systematic theology. Can you believe it? It's amazing. Wow. And I was in the middle of eating all these learning, right? So
yes.
Their faith is being challenged on daily basis. And the answers are there, found in the resources led by Norman Geisler.
That's great.
So it can impact the way that we see theology, that we are prepared to defend the faith.
Right. Very good. Raymond, what about you? What are some of the things that you've learned from studying my father's apologetics, philosophy, and theology have been helpful for you?
So before I come to know you, I have actually read some apologetics books, and I went to conferences. And there's something that always, that in my mind, that I go to different conferences and people are saying certain things like, we should not debate with people. We should have just listened to their worldview assumptions, and then let them figure out the contradictions that they have, and then we just tell them that you have to accept the Bible by faith. And even one of the seminar in Singapore Bible College was about introduction to apologetics, and the speaker was saying that that you should never do that. It's by faith. Then after knowing David, and also after knowing Norman Geisler's book, then I realized that the previous apologists that I've listened to, they are the presuppositionalists. Yeah, so the major impact of reading Dr. Geisler was his view on classical apologetics that allows us to give reason for our belief from ground up. We talk about truth, we talk about Bible, we talk about Jesus, right? It's building up our belief from the ground, and for each ground, we have a good reason for it. Yeah, and it helps me to explain to my people living friends that our faith is grounded. It's not just blind faith, but it's grounded on historical evidences. It's grounded philosophically, and it also helps me to use this classical apologetics to detect, the errors of other worldview and ask them probing questions in evangelism too. Yeah.
Very good. Umesh, what about you? What are some of the things maybe you learned about my father's apologetic approach?
Yes, sir. Actually, his materials really helped me a lot to get the deeper knowledge about God. And whenever I read his books and all the materials, I get so much information. And there I see the skills and how can and his materials also help me to understand the world. And I also learned from him that why we need to be more sensitive to our culture and to our people. So his materials really helped me to understand the importance of the people. And his materials increased the desire to share gospel with others. And yeah, I really personally thank his all the materials. They are really good.
Well, thanks. And it looks like we're out of time tonight, but thank you for joining us. This has been a great discussion, and maybe just before we close, it would be helpful to point out a few things. One is that we are looking to find people that have a burden to pray for certain countries of the globe, that we can get resources, more and more resources to these countries. My father's resources, our conversational evangelism resources, our new materials on discipleship. And if you have a burden to pray for a certain country, just email us at info@ngim.org and tell us what country you have a burden for, or maybe you are listening to us from that country and you want to help more and more Christians in your country and get more of our resources to them. We encourage you to contact us and let us know that. Now, growing up, I always knew my father was an important voice in Christianity. But I just want to, in closing, share a perspective. It wasn't until recently that I realized my father was the one that we should have listened to, and especially during the 70s to the 90s. And he left us all these tools. He's written over 100 books. And we need to help people, help Christians to understand that there are resources there. We need to help people understand where we got off track and how to get back on track. And that's what my father's resources can do. And so we want to encourage everyone who's listening to us to take the time to check out our website, look at all of our resources, and play a part with us to help change the culture for Christ. We want to cultivate generations who can do this and do this also in a way that puts Christ first. So here is our vision to make that possible. We want to see Christians adjust their approach in witnessing so that instead of focusing on winning the argument, we focus on winning the person. We want to see Christians use all the tools that my father developed so that instead of struggling against objections, we can clearly establish sound reasons for the Christian faith. And we want to see more and more Christians raise up other leaders to stand in the gap between the church and the culture so that we can be on guard for the word of God. And our ministry is helping achieve this by mentoring Christians around the globe in the how-tos of knowing, sharing, and growing in the faith. So please prayerfully consider supporting us by donating, volunteering, or committing to prayer, and send your feedback to info@ngim.org. Hey guys, Roberto, Raymond, Umesh, thanks for joining us tonight. I've enjoyed this discussion. From all of us at NGIM, good night.